My name is Chelsea Dunn, 24 years old. I still remember that fateful night. My father's hand came crashing across my face just because the soup I made had no salt. My cheek burned. My heart pounded wildly while my mother only smirked, stirring her spoon as if nothing had happened. The air in the room grew heavy, their eyes chaining me to my chair like I was nothing. I muttered an apology with trembling hands, but inside a part of me cracked. For years, I had been their punching bag both literally and figuratively. The next morning, my father leaned close, his breath sharp with whiskey, his voice laced with threat. "At noon today, an important guest will arrive. You'd better cover that bruise and smile, or you're out of this house." I nodded, playing the obedient daughter on the outside, but inside me anger and determination surged. He left for work like any other day, walking into his boss's office with his usual confidence. But this time, as the door shut behind him, his face turned pale, his hands trembled, and I quietly smiled, knowing the turning point had begun. Have you ever been hurt by your own family in a way you could never forget? Try putting yourself in my place. The morning after, I stared into the bathroom mirror, trying to cover the bruise on my cheek with layers of concealer. My hands shook as I dabbed the makeup, each stroke a reminder of the sting from last night. I couldn't let it show. Not today, not with guests coming. In the kitchen, I cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle filling the silence of our Mansfield home. My father, Edward Dunn, stormed in his tie, already nodded, his eyes scanning me like I was a piece of furniture. "Hurry up," he snapped, "and don't screw up breakfast like you did dinner." I nodded, biting my lip, my stomach twisting. I felt like a maid in my own house, scurrying to please him while he sipped coffee and checked his phone. 6 months ago, I'd lost my job at a Columbus advertising firm, downsized in a corporate shuffle. With no savings and nowhere else to go, I moved back to Mansfield, thinking I'd find comfort with my parents. Instead, Edward took over my bank account, claiming it was for my own good. He gave me $50 a week, barely enough for gas and groceries, while he and my mother, Barbara Dunn, lived comfortably off my grandfather's estate. Barbara wasn't any better. Yesterday, when I spilled coffee grounds while cleaning, she sneered, "You're useless, Chelsea. Can't even handle simple chores." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, piling onto the weight of their constant control. I plated the eggs, my hands moving on autopilot when Edward spoke again. "Make sure the table's set properly for lunch. No mistakes, you hear?" His tone was sharp, like a blade slicing through my thoughts. I murmured, "Yes, Dad," but my mind was elsewhere, replaying how I'd ended up here. After college, I'd dreamed of building a career, maybe even a life in the city. But the layoff hit hard, and my parents' house became a cage. Edward controlled every cent I had, checking my transactions like a hawk. Once, when I bought a $20 scarf, he lectured me for an hour about wasting his money. It wasn't his, it was mine. Or at least, it was supposed to be. As I set the table, Barbara walked in, her perfume sharp and her eyes sharper. "Don't embarrass us today," she said, adjusting her earrings. "You know how important this lunch is." I forced a nod, my throat tight. Important to them, maybe, but to me, it was just another performance. I was halfway through folding napkins when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered, keeping my voice low. "Chelsea Dunn," a man asked, his tone professional but urgent. "This is Stephen Hayes, manager of your grandfather's trust fund. We need to meet today. There's an issue with your account." My heart skipped. "What kind of issue?" I whispered, glancing at Barbara, who was now flipping through a magazine. "Irregularities," Stephen said. "Large withdrawals, unauthorized. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I froze, the phone hot against my ear. Unauthorized withdrawals. My account was locked tight. Edward made sure of that. "I'll try," I said, my voice barely audible. Stephen's tone softened. "It's serious, Chelsea. Don't delay." I hung up, my pulse racing. Barbara looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Just a friend, I lied, slipping the phone into my pocket. My mind spun. What was going on with my account? And why did Stephen sound so worried? As I finished setting the table, a spark of defiance flickered inside me. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to let Edward and Barbara keep me in the dark any longer. Noon arrived, and as I set a plate of salad on the dining table, the doorbell rang. My hands froze, the ceramic dish wobbling in my grip. I smoothed my dress, praying the concealer still hid the bruise on my cheek. Mom swept into the room, her smile polished and fake. "Answer the door," she ordered, her voice sharp as she adjusted a vase of flowers. I obeyed, opening the door to 3 guests. 2 were Mom's friends, Linda Carter and Susan Gray, their chatter filling the air with forced cheer. The 3rd was Jonathan Price, my old college friend from Ohio State. His familiar grin faltered when he saw me, his eyes lingering on my face a moment too long. "Chelsea," Jonathan said, stepping inside, his voice warm but cautious. "It's been a while." I forced a smile, my heart racing. We'd been close in college, sharing late-night study sessions and dreams of big careers. Now, standing in my parents' dining room, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. "Good to see you." I managed, guiding them to the table. Mom played the perfect hostess, laughing at Linda's stories about bridge club while Susan complimented the table setting. I served the salad, keeping my head down, Edward's warning echoing in my mind. No mistakes. No truth. As I poured iced tea, Jonathan leaned closer, his voice low. "You okay? You seem off?" His concern hit me like a wave, and my eyes stung. I glanced at Mom, who was distracted, then whispered, "I'm fine," but my voice cracked, betraying me. Jonathan's brow furrowed, and he touched my arm lightly. "You don't look fine," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "What's going on?" I froze, the pitcher trembling in my hands. Memories of our college days flooded back, Jonathan helping me cram for finals, always noticing when I was stressed. He hadn't changed, but I had trapped in this house, hiding bruises and lies. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Dad strode in, his briefcase in hand, his face tight with irritation. Traffic was a nightmare. He grumbled, tossing his jacket onto a chair. His eyes landed on me, sharp and assessing. "Chelsea, why are you standing there? Serve the food." I flinched, setting the pitcher down, my cheeks burning under his gaze. Jonathan's hand dropped from my arm, but I caught the way he watched Dad, his jaw tightening. Mom shot me a look, her smile never wavering. "Everything's perfect, dear," she said to the guests, but her eyes screamed at me to stay quiet. I moved to the kitchen, grabbing a tray of sandwiches, my hands shaking. Jonathan followed, pretending to help with the plates. "Chelsea," he whispered out of earshot. "That mark on your face, it's not nothing. Talk to me." His urgency made my throat tighten, and I nearly broke down, the weight of months under my parents' control crashing over me. "Not now," I hissed, glancing at the dining room where Mom was laughing loudly. Jonathan's eyes searched mine, and I saw the same determination he'd had when we tackled tough projects together. "I'm calling you tonight," he said firmly. "We're not done here." I nodded, a spark of hope igniting despite my fear. As I returned to the table, Dad's voice boomed, demanding more wine. I poured it, my hands steadying, but my mind raced. Jonathan had seen through the facade, and that phone call from Stephen still loomed. Something was shifting, and for the first time in months, I felt a crack in the walls my parents had built around me. After lunch, Jonathan texted me to meet at the park near my house. My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating, but I typed a quick reply and slipped out the back door, my heart pounding. The park was quiet, just a few kids on swings, and Jonathan was waiting on a bench, his face serious. "Chelsea," he said, standing as I approached, "we need to talk. Now." His voice carried the same urgency I remembered from college, when he'd pushed me to face tough truths. I sat, clutching my purse, the weight of his earlier concern pressing on me. "What's really going on?" he asked, his eyes locked on mine. "Don't tell me you're fine." I swallowed hard, the words stuck in my throat. For months I'd hidden the truth, but Jonathan's steady gaze broke something loose. "It's my parents," I whispered, my voice shaking. Since I moved back, they've been hurting me, physically, mentally. Dad hits me over the smallest things like dinner last night. Mom just watches, or worse, joins in. My eyes burned, but I kept going. They control everything, my money, my life. I'm trapped. Jonathan's face darkened, his fists clenching. That's not okay, Chelsea, he said, his voice low but fierce. You don't deserve this. I shook my head, fear clawing at me. If I speak up, they'll kick me out. I have nowhere to go. Dad controls my bank account. Jonathan leaned closer, his tone resolute. You're not alone in this. I'll help you find a way out. His words sparked a flicker of courage, but doubt lingered. Leaving meant losing the only home I had, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face that. Later that afternoon, I drove to the office of Stephen Hayes, the trust fund manager who'd called that morning. His office was small, tucked in a Mansfield strip mall, but the air felt heavy as I sat across from him. Chelsea, Stephen said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. Your grandfather's trust fund meant for you has been tampered with. Someone's withdrawn $75,000 using your account as a front. My stomach dropped. Who I asked, though, I already feared the answer. Stephen's face was grim. The transactions trace back to your father, Edward. He's been siphoning funds for over a year, hiding it from you. I stared at the documents, numbers blurring as my mind raced. Edward had always claimed the trust was tied up in legal issues, but this stealing from me using my name to cover it? Why didn't I know? I asked, my voice barely audible. Stephen sighed. Your parents have legal access as co-trustees, but this is fraud. You need to file a complaint to protect yourself, or you could be implicated. My hands trembled as I gripped the papers. File a complaint against my own parents. The thought made my chest tighten. Dad's anger, Mom's cold disdain. They'd destroy me. Stephen leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. Chelsea, this isn't just about money, it's about your future. If you don't act, they'll keep controlling you. I nodded, but my mind was a storm of fear and betrayal. As I left his office, my phone buzzed. Jonathan again, checking if I was okay. I didn't reply right away, but his persistence felt like an anchor. Back in college, he'd always been there, helping me through late-night panics over exams or breakups. Now his support was pulling me closer, stirring feelings I hadn't expected. Not love, not yet, but something warm, something real. When I got home, Mom was in the living room flipping through a catalog. Where were you? She demanded, her eyes narrowing. Errands, I lied, slipping past her. My heart raced as I hid the documents in my room. Edward wasn't home, but his presence loomed a constant threat. I thought of Jonathan's promise, Stephen's warning. For the first time, I saw a path forward, but it terrified me. Taking on my parents meant risking everything: shelter, family, safety. Yet as I lay awake that night, Jonathan's words echoed. I wasn't alone. Maybe, just maybe, I could fight back. That evening, I stood before Edward and Barbara in the living room, my resolve hardening. The documents from Stephen were tucked in my bag, their weight urging me forward. I clutched the strap, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I know about the trust fund, I said, looking straight at Dad. You've been stealing from it $75,000 using my name to hide it. Edward's face twisted, his eyes narrowing. You're crazy, he spat, leaning forward in his armchair. Be making up stories now, are you? His voice dripped with scorn, but I caught a flicker of unease in his expression. Mom stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed. Ungrateful, she hissed, her lips curling. We've given you a roof, food, and you accuse us of this nonsense. Keep this up, Chelsea, and you're out of this house. Her threat hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard it before, but this time I wasn't backing down. It's not nonsense. I shot back, my hands trembling. I have proof: bank records, transactions. You've been lying to me for years. Edward slammed his hand on the armrest, his face red. You're out of line, he growled. Go to your room before you make this worse. I turned away, my chest tight, their words echoing like a cage slamming shut. Upstairs, I locked my door and pulled out my phone, dialing the one person I knew I could trust. Ellen Brooks, our neighbor, answered on the second ring. Chelsea. Her voice was warm but concerned. What's wrong? I took a shaky breath. I need your help, Ellen. It's about my parents. I explained the trust fund, the confrontation, and my fear of what came next. Ellen was quiet for a moment, then said, Come over. I have something you need to hear. I slipped out, crossing the dark yard to Ellen's house. She welcomed me into her cozy kitchen, her face serious. I've suspected something was off for a while, she said, pulling out a small recorder. Ellen Brooks, the kind neighbor who'd always checked on me, had recorded Edward and Barbara arguing last month. I was in my backyard, she explained, and I overheard them through the open window. They were fighting about money, your money. She pressed play, and their voices crackled through. Edward's voice was sharp. If Chelsea finds out about the $75,000, we're done. Barbara snapped back. She won't. She's too weak to check. My stomach churned, their betrayal now undeniable. Ellen's eyes softened. There's more, she said. My security camera caught things: your dad shoving you in the driveway, Barbara yelling at you on the porch. It's been going on for months. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The camera footage was a lifeline, proof of the abuse I'd endured. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice breaking. Ellen sighed. I wasn't sure you were ready to face it. But now you are. She reached for her phone. I know someone who can help, a reporter, Richard Moore. He's been digging into local scandals and wants to expose cases like yours. We called Richard Moore that night. His voice was calm but eager over the speaker. Chelsea, if you've got evidence, I can make sure this story gets out, he said. But you'll need to go public. Are you ready for that? I hesitated, the thought of everyone in Mansfield knowing my family's shame overwhelming. But Ellen squeezed my hand, and I thought of Jonathan's promise, the documents, the recordings. I'm ready, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Richard agreed to meet us tomorrow to review the evidence. As I hung up, Ellen looked at me. You're doing the right thing, she said. This isn't just about you, it's about stopping them. Back in my room, I lay awake, the recorder's words looping in my mind. Edward and Barbara thought I was weak, but they were wrong. With Ellen's evidence and Richard's help, I had a chance to take back my life. The fear was still there, but so was something new: determination to fight, no matter what it cost. A few days later, I met Jonathan and Richard at a small coffee shop in downtown Mansfield. The air smelled of roasted beans, and the hum of conversation gave me a moment to breathe. Jonathan sat across from me, his eyes steady, while Richard, notepad in hand, leaned forward. We've got a strong case, Jonathan said, sliding a folder toward me. Inside were the bank records from Steve and Ellen's recordings and timestamps from her security footage. I flipped through the pages, my fingers tracing the evidence of Edward's theft and the abuse I'd endured. Richard scribbled notes, his pen moving fast. This is explosive, he said. I'll hold the story until after the trial to maximize its impact, but it'll shake this town. I nodded, my throat tight. Filing a lawsuit against my parents felt like stepping off a cliff, but Jonathan's calm presence kept me grounded. You're doing the right thing, he said, his hand brushing mine briefly. That touch sent a warmth through me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. Back in college, we'd flirted with something more, but life pulled us apart. Now his support was stirring those old feelings, and I caught myself smiling despite the weight of what lay ahead. Back home that evening, Edward cornered me in the kitchen. He shoved a document across the counter, his face hard. Sign this, he barked, his voice low and threatening. It clears up the trust fund misunderstanding. Do it, or you're cut off, no money, no house. The paper was a legal waiver claiming the $75,000 was a family loan. My stomach twisted, another lie to bury his crime. Mom stood nearby, her eyes cold. Don't be stupid, Chelsea, she said. Sign it and move on. I stared at the paper, my heart pounding. Every instinct screamed to obey, to avoid their wrath, but I thought of Ellen's recordings, Jonathan's encouragement, and Richard's promise. No, I said. pushing the paper back. Edward's eyes widened, his hand twitching like he might strike me again. "You ungrateful little," he started, but I cut him off. "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice steady. "I know what you did, and I'm done hiding it." Mom gasped, her face paling, but I didn't wait for their response. I grabbed my bag stuffed with essentials and walked out the front door. My legs shook as I crossed the street to Ellen's house, but I didn't look back. Edward's threats echoed, but they couldn't stop me now. Ellen welcomed me into her home, her spare room already set up with a bed. "You're safe here," she said, handing me a cup of tea. Her kindness steadied me, but my mind raced. Leaving home meant losing the last shred of security I'd clung to, yet it also felt like breaking free. I texted Jonathan, letting him know I'd moved out. His reply came instantly, "Proud of you. I'm here." That night, as I lay in Ellen's guest room, I replayed our coffee shop meeting. Jonathan's quiet strength, the way he listened, was more than just friendship. I wasn't ready to name it, but the warmth in my chest grew stronger. The next morning, Jonathan stopped by Ellen's to check on me. We sat on her porch, the autumn air crisp. "You're braver than you think," he said, his eyes soft. I laughed, a little shaky. "I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm falling." He reached for my hand, his grip firm. "You're not falling alone," he said. His words hit deep, and for a moment I let myself imagine a future where I wasn't defined by my parents' control. Our fingers stayed laced together, and I felt a pull toward him, something beyond gratitude. As we talked about the lawsuit, the trial, and Richard's article, I realized Jonathan wasn't just helping me fight, he was becoming my anchor. By the end of the week, Richard called to confirm he'd gathered enough for a draft article. "Once the trial's over, this goes public," he said. "Your parents won't walk away clean." His confidence fueled mine, but fear lingered. Edward and Barbara would fight back, and I had to be ready. With Jonathan by my side and Ellen's roof over my head, I was starting to believe I could face them not as their daughter, but as someone taking back her life. On a cold morning at the courthouse, I stood before Edward and Barbara, my heart pounding but steady. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as I handed over the evidence: Stephen's bank records, Ellen's recordings, and her security footage. Edward sat rigid, his jaw tight, while Barbara's face was a mask of forced calm. I recounted how they'd stolen $75,000 from my grandfather's trust using my account to hide their fraud. The judge listened intently as Ellen's recording played Edward's voice, admitting to the theft echoing through the room. Each word felt like a chain breaking, freeing me from their control. The prosecution laid out the case clearly. Edward had forged signatures, siphoning funds for personal use. Barbara, while complicit, hadn't directly handled the transactions, so the charges focused on Edward. After hours of testimony, the judge delivered the verdict. Edward was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to repay $75,000. Barbara escaped jail but sat silently, her reputation in tatters as whispers spread among the onlookers. I met Edward's glare as he was led away, his eyes burning with rage, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt untouchable. Outside the courthouse, Jonathan waited, his presence a quiet strength. "You did it," he said, pulling me into a hug. His warmth steadied me, but the victory felt heavy. Later that day, he told me he'd reported Edward's actions to his business partners at a Columbus consulting firm. "They cut him off," Jonathan said, his voice firm. "No more contracts, no more deals." The news hit hard. Edward's empire, built on lies, was crumbling faster than I'd expected. By evening, Richard's article hit the stands. The Mansfield News Journal's front page screamed the truth: local couple exposed in trust fund fraud, daughter reveals abuse. Richard detailed the theft, the recordings, and the years of control I'd endured, painting a stark picture of betrayal. Mansfield buzzed with gossip. Neighbors who'd once smiled at Barbara now turned away. At Ellen's house, where I was still staying, we read the article together. "You've changed things," Ellen said, her eyes proud. "People are talking and they're listening." I nodded, the weight of the town's attention both daunting and empowering. The next morning, I received a call from Donna West, the president of the community board. She'd read Richard's article and wanted to meet. At her office, a modest space lined with plaques, Donna greeted me warmly. "Chelsea," she said, "your courage has inspired us. We'd like you to serve as an advisor for the Community Trust Fund." I blinked, caught off guard. The role would involve overseeing grants for local families, ensuring no one else faced what I had. "You've proven you can stand up to corruption," Donna added. "We need that." Her offer felt like a lifeline, a chance to rebuild my life with purpose. I left her office, my mind spinning. Jonathan met me outside, his smile bright. "What's the news?" he asked, leaning against his car. I told him about Donna's proposal, and his eyes lit up. "That's perfect for you," he said. "You're going to make a difference." His belief in me stirred something deep, a warmth that had grown since our coffee shop talks. We walked to a nearby park, the same one where I'd first confessed the abuse. As we sat on a bench, our shoulders brushing, I realized how much Jonathan had become my rock. Not just a friend, but someone I trusted with my future. Back at Ellen's, I stared at the article again, its words cementing my resolve. Edward was gone, Barbara was shunned, and I was no longer their prisoner. Donna's offer and Jonathan's support opened a door I hadn't dared imagine. Mansfield, once a cage, now felt like a place where I could start over. As I looked out Ellen's window, the town's quiet streets stretching before me, I knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I was ready to face it on my terms. A month later, I stood in my new apartment preparing for my wedding to Jonathan. The small space in downtown Mansfield was modest, but it was mine, paid for with the $30,000 I'd received as partial restitution from the trust fund. Boxes of decorations littered the floor, and I smiled as I hung a string of fairy lights, imagining the life I was building. The money wired after Edward's sentencing had given me the freedom to leave Ellen's guest room and start fresh. Each piece of furniture, a second-hand couch, a sturdy table, felt like a step toward independence. Jonathan and I had grown closer through the lawsuit, our bond forged in late-night talks and shared determination. At our engagement party, he'd knelt in the park where I'd first confessed the abuse, his proposal simple but heartfelt. Now, as I sorted through wedding invitations, I made a choice: Edward and Barbara would not be invited. A letter had arrived from Edward in prison, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Barbara had called, her voice shaking, promising to make things right. I read their words, then set them aside. Their remorse came too late, and I refused to let their shadows taint my new beginning. Barbara had left Mansfield weeks ago, her social circle shattered after Richard's article. Whispers followed her until she packed up and moved to Cleveland, leaving behind the life she'd clung to. Edward remained in prison, his 5-year sentence a constant reminder of his crimes. The family I'd once known was gone, fractured beyond repair. At first the loss stung, but now it felt like shedding a weight I'd carried too long. With Donna's support, I'd launched a nonprofit to help victims of family abuse. Named Haven, it offered resources and counseling, drawing from my own experience. Jonathan helped with the paperwork, while Ellen connected us with local donors. Richard even wrote a follow-up piece highlighting Haven's mission and my story. The work was exhausting, but fulfilling, each meeting with a survivor, reminding me why I'd fought. At a community gathering in the town hall, I stood before a crowd of neighbors, my voice steady as I shared my journey. "I lost my family," I said, "but I found my strength. No one should live in fear at home." The room erupted in applause, and Donna, standing nearby, nodded proudly. Later, she pulled me aside. "You've given Mansfield something real," she said. "Haven's already changing lives." Her words settled in my chest, a quiet validation. Jonathan joined us, his hand slipping into mine. "You were amazing up there," he whispered, his eyes warm. I squeezed his hand, feeling the future we'd build together taking shape. The wedding day arrived, a crisp autumn afternoon at a local vineyard. Ellen walked me down the aisle, her smile radiant as she stood in for the family I'd lost. Richard and Donna were among the guests, their presence a testament to the community I'd found. As I exchanged vows with Jonathan, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. I promise to stand by you. He said, his voice steady through every fight, every victory. My vows echoed his, a pledge to face the world together. After the ceremony, we danced under string lights, the vineyard glowing with warmth. I caught Ellen wiping a tear, and Richard raised a glass in a toast. The absence of Edward and Barbara was a silent victory. No apologies could undo their betrayal. As Jonathan spun me on the dance floor, I thought of Haven the Trust Fund and the community that had rallied around me. Mansfield, once a place of pain, now held hope. That night, as we sat in our apartment, still in our wedding clothes, I reflected on the lesson I'd learned. Family doesn't justify injustice. Standing up for yourself, even when it means losing those closest to you, is the only way to reclaim your life. I'd paid a price parent security a past, but I'd gained so much more: Jonathan Haven and a voice that wouldn't be silenced. As I looked out at the town's twinkling lights, I knew I was finally free.